Joining us now is our next guest, Emily Schrader. She's a journalist and a human rights activist. Emily, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I want to start with this. The constant calls for a ceasefire. We're seeing protests all across the U.S. Seems like the justice warriors have completely forgotten about October 7th. Meanwhile, we have, hostages still there. Where are the calls to release the hostages?
Absolutely. I mean, I think from day one, the calls for ceasefire have actually been quite misguided because this isn't something that will act in the interest of the Palestinian people or will actually result in saving more Palestinian lives. In fact, quite the opposite. When we're talking about a long-term strategy of dealing with, quite frankly, the Islamic regime in Iran's occupation of Gaza, we can't continue to allow this Iranian proxy, Hamas, as well as Islamic Jihad in the Gaza Strip, to continue acting without repercussions. I mean, they're damaging the safety and well-being of the Palestinian people, just as they're damaging the safety and well-being of the Israeli people. So really, being pro-Palestinian and being pro-Israel on this issue today are the same thing.
Yeah, and the people of Iran have been very outspoken, especially in the U.S. against Hamas, because they know the dangers of Islamist terror. Talk about that.
Well, it's not actually just the people of Iran. Of course, we have seen the Iranian people both in the diaspora as well as inside of Iran. I'm in touch on a pretty regular basis with Iranians on the ground in Iran, and they 110% support the state of Israel because they understand the level of depravity and the level of evil that we're facing from the Islamic Republic of Iran. But even further than that, it's not just Iranians. I'm in touch with dozens of women on a regular basis throughout the Middle Eastern region who have vociferously condemned Hamas, who want nothing more than to see an end to Hamas. And if you care about the future of the Palestinian people, much less the Israeli people, then you should also support the destruction of Hamas. There is nothing peaceful, ironically, about a ceasefire today.
Yeah. And they should be outspoken. A lot of people are misguided, as you just said. What do you make of the U.S. response to the Israel-Hamas war? Is the Biden White House playing both sides?
I mean, I think that the support from President Biden has been very strong from the beginning. As an Israeli and as an American, I'm very grateful for that. However, that being said, I don't know that the Biden administration has the correct approach when it comes to dealing with the actual threat, which isn't just Hamas. In fact, it's the Iranian regime, as I mentioned. If we're not dealing with the head of the snake, the core of the problem, which is the Ayatollah, we're not going to see an end to this support for terrorism and this destabilization and occupation, not by Israel, of course, but by the Iranian regime across the Middle East. This is something that has to be dealt with strongly. We cannot be talking about releasing $6 billion or $12 billion or any of the frozen assets that the regime has. We need to double down on the Iranian regime in every way possible in order to defeat this evil and ensure the safety and security and human rights of everyone in the Middle East, from Palestinians to Israelis to everyone else in the region.
Emily, we see the protests all across the college campuses. It's becoming more and more clear that Qatar is funding America's universities, which makes sense that the Free Palestine groups mobilized pretty quickly. That just didn't happen overnight. We have a big problem. I mean, we see donors pulling money, $100 million, but that's really nothing compared to what Qatar is putting in.
That's right. I mean, there have been billions of unreported dollars going into American university. And quite frankly, now we see the result. I myself was a student at USC who dealt with this same type of rhetoric that we're seeing today. The only difference is our tolerance for intolerance has grown over time. And when you look at the rhetoric that's coming out of universities, it's more extreme than ever before. It's more explicit support for violence than ever before. It's more anti-American. This is not just about Israel. It's not just about the challenges that Israel faces in the Middle East. This is about a civilizational fight. It's an anti-American agenda.
Yes.
It's an anti-democratic agenda, and it's an anti-human rights agenda. That is what the Free Palestine movement stands for. And that's why everywhere you see it, you see violence, you see chaos, you see American flags being torn down in Washington, D.C., in New York, in San Francisco. This is not a movement that is about respecting the rights and dignity of any people, much less the Palestinians. If you're siding with Hamas, you are not pro-Palestinian. And what we saw after October 7th was that there were protests on October 8th. What are you protesting?
Right.
What are you protesting? Because at that point, Israel hadn't even responded. And so I think it's very important to remember the context of this entire situation, which is that this wasn't that Israel initiated a war. Hamas with the backing of the assurance and approval of the Islamic Republic of Iran, they initiated a war. They bear responsibility for it. And every single life that is lost on both sides in this conflict, they have blood on their hands.
It's very anti-American. You're right. What are they protesting? Free Palestine? Free Palestine from who? Israel hasn't occupied that region since 2005 when they pulled out. Emily, you are right now in the halls of Congress. Is that where you're at? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, what your mission is.
So right now I'm literally in the halls of Congress. I've been meeting with representatives in the Senate as well as the House throughout the day to discuss the links between the Iranian regime and, of course, Hamas. That the terrorism and the effects and the impact that we're seeing from Hezbollah in the north and from Hamas in the Gaza Strip are at the direct instruction and command of the Iranian regime. We've seen throughout the past 2 months that officials from Hamas, senior officials who are living in Qatar conveniently, not in Gaza, have also been meeting with officials from the Iranian regime. So it's very clear that this isn't just an effort of one individual terrorist organization. This is something much bigger. And I think it's part of the reason that it's so important and so critical that the United States stand with its allies, stand with Israel until Hamas is defeated, because the continuation of Hamas rule would spell disaster for everyone involved.
Yeah, and the Hamas leaders, you just brought up a good point, are living their lavish lives, their billion-dollar, we saw pictures of them in their jets, enjoying their lives while they're sending, Palestinians living there, doing their dirty work. Emily Schrader, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate the work that you're doing, and fight on. I didn't know you were a USC Trojan like myself.
Fight on.
Good to see you. Thank you
so much.